Hello and welcome to In Real Life. So this is one of many really honest conversations about motherhood as it actually is, not the polished version at all. And I'm really excited to talk to you today, Cara, mainly about that kind of early season of motherhood, napping routines, and the importance of trying to protect your own sanity, but also bedtime, which I feel you will be able to do with so much authority, both as a mum, but also the founder of SnoozeShade. So I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm so excited to talk to you too.
So I really remember, so Freddie is 10 and Ottie's 6 now, but I remember feeling sort of really desperate to feel like a person again. I wanted to see friends, but I was terrified of that ruining the day by missing that nap routine or them falling asleep in the car. Did you find that as well when your daughter Holly
Yes.
was little?
So Holly's now a massive 18, so it's almost hard to remember back, but at the same time, I sort of constantly think back to it, really, in many ways. I just found actually the loss of identity as a woman was one of the hardest things that I sort of came to terms with when I became a mum, or as a person rather. I just remember people not really being that interested in talking to you. I remember going to this party. I'd literally just had Holly, and somebody said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I've just had a baby." And they're like, "Oh, that's nice," and sort of turned away. So I had a very challenging pregnancy. So I had a very, very bad case of something called SPD, which is symphysis pubis dysfunction, and I actually couldn't walk for nearly 9 months. And so this is actually one of the reasons I invented SnoozeShade was, well, there were multiple reasons really. One was because I was out and about. So as soon as I was able to stand up, because for about the first 3 months, I couldn't even change a nappy. I couldn't stand up long enough. So, and I was in a lot of pain. So, but at the same time, I do think sort of life gives you what you need. And so I think had I not been effectively sort of housebound as I was, I would have been out and about a lot more. And I got a lot of really good high quality bonding time with Holly because we just used to sit and cuddle and it was great. And I might not have been like that had I been more physically mobile. And then the other thing that came to fruition was the fact that I then obviously wanted to walk a lot. So I hadn't been able to walk for so long. So I used to do I'd get up in the morning, I'd go and walk to Sainsbury's, go and buy stuff for breakfast, and I'd go back and walk again for lunch, walk for dinner. I was just walking a lot because I was just so grateful. I wish I actually walked as much now as I walked then. And so obviously I would go out when she was sleeping, napping, etc. But also at the time, she was born at the end of October. So I was up and around again sort of February, March, and the weather was a little bit sort of, not brilliant. So I do things like, putting a coat over the pram or a blanket over the pram, all these sorts of things. And then, they fall on the floor and, you run over them with the pram and you end up having to get your things dry cleaned. You're freezing because, the baby's like toasty against the cold wind, but you're not. And then one of the other things that I really wanted to do was there was a class called Buggy Fit. And it was a out and about stroller class. And I really wanted to do it because I was just so excited to be up and around again. And I wanted to get out and meet people who also had babies. So I was a sort of late-ish mum. I had Holly when I was about 35. And, a lot of my friends had already had babies by the time I had her. So I wanted to get out and about and I couldn't because the classes always clashed with her nap time. Always. And it was so frustrating because I really wanted to get out there, get some fresh air and do all the things I wanted to do. And yet I couldn't because I couldn't do it regularly. And then that really sort of stopped me from doing it at all because I couldn't put it into my diary regularly because I knew there'd be other things I needed to do. And whilst Holly was a really good sleeper in many ways, she was a better sleeper during the day than she was at night, but she was a good napper. But the thing is, I knew then that the sort of hell that would ensue trying to get her to bed if she was overtired would possibly not make my positive experience worthwhile. So that there was a sort of decision to be made, and I was never a sort of sleep routine like fiend. I definitely made the sleep routines that I sort of followed fit within my lifestyle rather than making my life fit around them. But at the same time, there did need to be some kind of routine. That's definitely one of the things I've sort of found over the last sort of 16 years. I work with a lot of baby sleep experts and things like that with SnoozeShade. And there do need to be sort of some kind of rules, boundaries, whatever you want to call them, that enable the child to know what's going on during the day. And too much chaos can make it chaotic for everyone, basically.
Yeah, and I suppose it's about finding that balance. Like you were saying, I was very, very strict with routine, making sure that the naps were at certain times of day, but it meant that I was then missing out on
Well,
stuff.
it's always about balance, and it's about you restrict one, you end up there's always a price to pay, I suppose. And that's where I came in really, was that I wanted the freedom and the flexibility for Holly to get the sleep that she needed, and for me to be able to get out and do things that I needed to do. Whether that was a date night in the evening with her dad, whether that was a coffee with girlfriends. I mean, I remember that, I literally can still remember the moment where I was like, surely there must be something out there, because I was out with a whole group of girlfriends. It was my NCT class, and we were all sat around and we're having lunch, and everyone was doing the same thing. It was like everyone fed the babies because they were all in strollers by that point. It was probably about sort of 8 months old, something like that. And then everyone was doing the same thing. It was like putting a muslin, putting a blanket, putting a cardigan, doing whatever it was over the pram to try and get them to go to sleep. And I just literally thought, surely there must be like a blackout blind, for the buggy, like there is for like the nursery window. And wouldn't it be useful?
I mean, it's absolutely ingenious, because I mean, I remember just like, and you try to do it, but if you're on holiday and then you worry about them becoming too warm and you don't want to cover the pushchair, and then I would get myself into a flat. I think yeah, I'm just trying to. There's no worse sort of feeling. I remember feeling like being in restaurants or something, and the baby's crying. You're trying to get the baby to sleep, and you've got other people there, and you're disturbing people, and your lunch is going cold, and you get a bit hot and bothered. And yeah, it's finding those sort of tools and ways to get out and get your own sanity back, and making sure everybody is sleeping. And so obviously SnoozeShade is an incredible way of doing that. Did you have any other tips and things that or tricks that worked for you apart from the blackout?
Well, I mean, to be fair, I remember I was very judgy before I had a baby about how life was going to be.
I think
And
we're all
obviously,
experts before we have children.
of course we are. And my child was never going to need a dummy, was never going to have any screen time, all of that. So the dummy was the first thing that I had to give into, because Holly had a tendency, if she used to, after she'd eat, she'd put her whole fist in her mouth and then sort of make herself throw up. Don't know why. But I was with a girlfriend of mine. And she said, well, have you tried a dummy? And I was like, God, no, please, God. And I gave her a dummy, and she looked like Maggie out of The Simpsons. She was like happy as Larry. I did have one very strict rule, which was not to walk around with a dummy. So she could only really sort of use it when it was sort of associated with sleep, stroke, relaxing, trying to get her to go to sleep. But that was my sort of the strip. But otherwise, I mean, I think she had it until, I can't remember what age she was. It was far past the age you're supposed to. And we were able to persuade her that the dummy fairy needed to take it away for all the other children who needed it. But I think that's the other thing. I think you've got to do what's right for you. And, what's right for you and your child isn't always what's right for everyone else. And I think there's a lot of shoulds in the world. I hate the word should, actually. It's not a nice word, because it's sort of implied, sort of a bit judgmental, a bit sort of like, you should be doing this. I think it's more, try this, try that, be open-minded. Parenting, let me tell you as well. I mean, as I said, I've now got an 18-year-old, and I would say it's actually in some ways more challenging now parenting an 18-year-old who's going through her A-levels. With the support that I have to give is very different to the sort of early days. In the early days, it was literally, wet nappy. Are they fed? Are they tired? And as you get older, you're having to deal with a whole massive range of like life basically that comes at them. And I think I've always just tried to, I suppose one of the things I've always done is I've always talked to Holly. I've always, whenever there's been something that's gone on in life, I've talked to her about it. I've sort of explained to her, what this is, what that is, why this might happen. I've always tried to sort of include her in things without, obviously, not above her pay grade, if you know what I mean. But, I think that has helped generally in her life in terms of sort of understanding what goes on in the world. And I suppose I don't really talk to babies like babies. I tend to talk to them like people. So
I think that's really important. I've always done that with the children as well. Me, obviously, looking at it from sort of a nutrition standpoint, we've always been quite strict. I suppose other people might look at it, but I wanted the children, like you said, not above their pay grade, but to understand why mummy's saying no, the Haribo or whatever it is. It's not because I don't love you. It's because I do. This is the reason why I don't want you to have it. There's times where we can, there's times where we can't. And it's not no because I'm being unfair. It's just why I'm doing it. And
I
so
think
far,
everything in moderation as well. I do think that's a very strong thing, which is that, I expect they are allowed to have a Haribo occasionally. They just can't have them all the time. And that's the thing, I think where parents struggle is when they become very dictatorial. I've always been a little bit of like, have a little bit of what you fancy, because when you ban things, I know I remember I was banned from having white bread at home when I was growing up, and I was banned from having butter. And, we had to have margarine.
Life is bread and butter.
Well, so what I used to do is I used to go around to a friend's house whose mum always had that lovely sort of baker style white bread, with a thick crust and everything. And she always had butter, and she had Bovril as well. So we had Marmite, and I just literally used to go and have big, like thick slices of bread with butter slathered on, and then some Bovril on top. Oh, it was heaven. And the thing is, you will find a way, and so it's just better just to say, yeah, go on, then have a little bit. It's fine. And I think that's one thing I've always tried to do with Holly to a certain extent is just encourage healthy eating. I
Yeah.
think particularly with girls, it's so important not to demonize anything in food. And I've only ever really tried to talk about whether something's healthy or not, whether not necessarily, whether or not it's a good food or a bad food.
Yeah, and I think it's understanding the reasons why things are consumed in moderation, not
Yes.
because it's bad, but it might be it's not as good for our digestion or our energy levels, or
That's
and
right, blood
explaining it.
sugar, and it's going to send your blood sugar soaring, and then you're going to have a plummet afterwards. All of those things, are quite interesting. And I think especially actually, I mean, I'm getting on now, or getting on, but I mean, like, I'm sort of early 50s, and you have to start thinking more healthily about your own food intake. You can't just get away with, not that I did eat McDonald's every 5 seconds when I was younger, but you can't live on McDonald's anymore. You have to start giving your body what it needs. And I think that's really something to teach children right from the word go, is that, I think also trying to create a love of vegetables and fruit. I mean, I have failed miserably in the sense that Holly really hates cooked fruit. I don't know why, but she's always been very good with vegetables, really.
Well, I mean, cooked fruit is lovely, but nutritionally raw is much better. And yeah, she loves her vegetables, and that's incredible, and that's great. If you were to sort of look back now, sort of now that you're not so far beyond it, but far away from those early baby days and these things, what feels big in hindsight and what doesn't, and sort of what do you wish mums felt less pressure about now that you can look back on it?
To be honest, I do wish they were a bit less maybe routine driven, in terms of feeling a bit able to be a bit more flexible, because I think, we create rods for our own backs a lot of the time, and an extra hour here or an extra hour there, in the bigger picture of life, it's not really going to have like that much of an impact on anything. And I think also just enjoying every stage. Everyone says every stage is different. Every stage is enjoyable. I mean, some stages aren't that enjoyable actually, and that's okay as well. I think that's the other thing. I think there's this sort of, I didn't really enjoy being a mum when I did in the very early days. Having Holly was a miracle. She was an IVF baby. So, in many ways, I'd spent 4 very long years trying to get pregnant, and had been through a lot. And then the pregnancy itself was pretty hellish. But, she's absolutely the best thing I've ever done in my life. I say done, but that she is my reason to get up in the morning. I look at her and I get a bit emotional, because she's just incredible. And that really, that's something that I think there's nothing else in my life I can really say has done that. I mean, other than, funnily enough, SnoozeShade. Weirdly, I always say I have 2 babies. I have Holly and I have SnoozeShade. But Holly is my legacy, I suppose, really.
So yeah, so now that you are kind of not so far beyond it, but beyond the baby days, what felt sort of big in hindsight and what doesn't now? And what do you wish more mums felt less pressure about?
So I think for me, I'd say parenthood is not perfection, and doesn't need to be perfect to be fantastic. You can have really crappy days, and that's okay. I think, there is sometimes that's whole social media pressure to be, happy all the time, everything's wonderful all the time. And life's not like that. And that's the same with parenting as it is with any other part. Your job is not always going to be fantastic. School life wasn't always amazing. There are ups and downs in life, and having a bad day doesn't make you a bad parent. And then, the other thing I think really is, whilst I do understand that a lot of people feel the need for routine, is that, don't make routine your prison, because, life's short. And you just need to be out there enjoying life. And the fact, if your child occasionally goes to bed like beyond their normal set bedtime routine, like really it won't affect the rest of their life or yours. But the memories, you'll never ever get back otherwise. You'll always remember. I mean, I've got various friends, and whenever you sort of talk about life generally, you don't talk about the bedtimes, you don't talk about the sleep, you talk about the things you did, the adventures you had, the laughs you had. Those are really the giggling sessions where, everyone's just falling about. Those are the things that you remember.
I love that. I think that is incredible advice. And I wish I'd had that when I was in the thick of it with
So do
everybody.
I.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that mine are a bit older, I look back and I think I was probably too strict with the routine and everything.
Well, and the other thing I would say is don't worry about that, because tomorrow is another day. And,
Exactly.
that's the other thing. What you've done in the past is the past. What you can change is the future. And that is 100% correct. Like, you don't have to be stuck worrying about what you've done. Just move forward and enjoy, and be maybe slightly less strict now.
Thank you so much for that incredible advice. And I think my takeaway from that is a bad day doesn't make you a bad parent.
Absolutely not.
A happy mum generally means sort of a happy family and a happy child. And keeping everybody's moods up and spirits up is much more important than bedtime at 7 o'clock on the dot.
Okay, I 100% agree on that one.
Well, thank you so much for chatting today. And like I said, even though I'm not in the thick of it anymore, I think I've learned some very valuable lessons about how I will actually be parenting going forward. Even though I was strict, I can be more relaxed now. And I think we will all
Well,
benefit from it.
you have to be strict, and it's tougher being stricter with them when they're older as well, actually, because they don't listen to you the same way, and they know better.
Yes, I have already learned that. I'm being told all the time, could you put your plate in the dishwasher? It's a bowl, actually, mummy.
Well, yes, okay, well, that makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Put it in the dishwasher.
I don't care whether it's a bowl, a spoon, a pan, put it in the dishwasher.
And not next to it like your father, in the dishwasher. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
Huge congratulations with SnoozeShade, and good luck to Holly with her A-levels.
Thank you so much. We're going to need it, I think, and when we don't and we do, all help, all positive vibes appreciated.